So I found out when I was a kid, ever since I started working with my coach, there are these moments I have where I feel extremely, extremely entitled to things. And when I don't get my way, I become very, very depressed. I become very depressed and I start to feel like a victim and I start to feel sorry for myself that I didn't get that thing. And this is especially pertaining to like outcomes that I want in things that I really want to succeed in, like my golf game or my business. And if things don't happen my way, I like to exert control. And he pointed out that this probably stemmed somewhere from childhood. And I remember when I was a child, I would throw these tantrums. And whenever I threw a tantrum, I would get what I want because my parents felt guilty somewhat because they left me for a year to go abroad and work. And so they felt guilty. They spoiled me. And anytime I wanted something like a toy, I would see a toy, I would just get down on the floor and like start wailing and just make a scene. And so subconsciously, I have developed a pattern where it's like I get what I want. I just need to try hard enough. And my try hard enough instead of I'm going to figure it out has become, oh, I'm just going to feel sorry for myself and cry. And then daddy or mommy will get me that thing. And so because I've been trained that way, it doesn't serve me out in the real world. And sometimes it most of the time it zaps me off my power. So within me, I have these two dynamics, the inner parent and the inner child. And most of the time, the inner child wins where it gets its way, and I just stay in this funk where I just end up feeling sorry for myself and how nothing works out for me. From time to time, I get into that state. I do eventually find a way to come out of it. I've trained myself to come out of it and get to work and like gain my power back. But that kind of state, that lull that I have zaps me temporarily off my power. And as you start to perform at really, really high levels, you can't really afford to be in that state, not even a little bit. You know, you have to learn how to quickly get yourself out of it. And so what I had to learn when I was working with my coach is how to reparent myself. So in little instances where I'm like, oh, you know, I'm so excited for this new campaign to do well, or this new video that I put out to do well. I keep checking, like, is it doing well now? Is it doing well now? Why isn't it doing well? Why isn't it doing well? But then there's another part of me that's like, no, stop checking. Just get to work. Do what you need to do. And God will take care of the rest. It will work out when it does work out. It doesn't really change anything as you keep checking it. But to be honest, what I find is that when I keep checking it, I actually sabotage my results even more. And most of the time when I don't check, like back in the day when I first hired my very first sales rep, I remember checking the payments channel or like our payments account. I just keep incessantly checking it. Like, oh, did he close the deal? Did he close the deal? Oh, I could have closed it myself. And so that prevented me for a very, very long time from actually going ahead and hiring someone and delegating responsibility because I wanted to control everything myself. I wanted to make everything perfect myself. So what I learned to do recently was to reparent myself and do it correctly. Whereas every time that dialogue comes up, I tell myself, no, Quazi, you will not check now. You'll check when the time to check comes. As I keep retraining myself in this, I started to notice that that inner child started to obey more, started to obey the parent more. And so in this way, you can kind of reprogram yourself to become successful. So a lot of the times you can realize you need reparenting based on the kind of patterns that you're noticing in your life. For example, if you keep attracting a similar kind of relationship or you keep feeling anxious and you have this like cycle going on. If you observe yourself for long enough, you're going to start to notice there are different cycles that happen. Like you'll feel really great and then you'll get comfortable and then you'll go back down, then you'll feel uncomfortable and start to feel sorry for yourself. The blaming yourself, the lack of feeling security, the lack of feeling safe, that typically stems from childhood where you were in a household where your parents maybe fought a lot or experienced a splitting up of your parents and it led you to feeling very, very unsafe in the household. And that kind of feeling keeps coming up in your day-to-day life because you're used to it. That's a familiar feeling. And when that familiar feeling comes up and we start to unconsciously suffer that feeling, it starts to manifest outcomes in our lives that makes us feel less and less safe. So, for example, a lot of people who have childhood issues that I noticed with my clients, they didn't feel safe in their home. They're afraid to take risks in their businesses. They're afraid to take risks because they don't feel protected by a greater power. You know, they don't have this faith and trust in themselves or in God, the universe, because they didn't feel safe as they grew up. They grew up in a childhood home where they never had affection, love from their parents. Their parents were always harsh on them, and that voice always keeps popping up. Like, no matter what they do, it's never good enough, because maybe when you're younger, you got a grade in class, like you got a B or something, and B isn't good enough. You got to get an A. You got to go to Harvard. You got to become successful. So these voices, these programs run in our heads from our childhood, which leads us to manifesting outcomes where we never feel satisfied, never feel good enough. Everything has to be perfect. And when one thing isn't perfect, we start to feel unsafe. We start to feel anxious and nervous. When you first begin to recognize that there is a pattern that keeps happening in your life, and it's typically tied to you feeling a way that you don't want to feel, whether it be unsafe, insecure, nervous, anxious, and it typically occurs in a pattern, and you've identified it. How you change this pattern, a lot of the times, 80% of the time, when you become aware, this awareness will bring insights to your psyche on how to solve it. But the most prominent way to change it that I've noticed is to notice that there are different personas within you. But one persona has become way too strong and the other persona is weak. There isn't a balance of the bond between these two selves. Like in my instance, the parent and the child. The bond between the parent and the child is very one side dominant. The child always wins. So I have to retrain myself through inner dialogue and how I speak to myself and which part of myself is winning now to change that pattern. So now my focus has been to listen more to the dialogue of that inner parent and double down on the inner parent rather than the inner child and letting the inner child get his way all the time. In your life, when you start to notice these patterns happen when the inner child comes out and it's starting to feel like the victim, what would the parent say? What would your higher self say? If you were your higher self, how would you behave in this instance, in this scenario? You just have to keep waking up and speaking to yourself as though you were your higher self, as though you are your higher self and you're speaking to this lower self or this child self, whatever you want to call it, and you're bringing this child self up. What Carl Jung talked about was the importance of being whole rather than being good. So when we become whole, every single persona within us, the inner child, the feminine, masculine side, the shadow, the ego, they all have an equal standing within our psyche, rather than one becoming way too dominant and one becoming way too non-dominant, recessive, whatever you want to call it. So in my personal life, I realized that whenever this inner child wins, it zaps me from my power. I feel powerless, like I have given some external circumstance some power. And so typically when something in my business isn't doing well, like I'll feel really excited about a new campaign or something on advertising that I'm running, and then it won't do as well as I hoped it would. And I had spent months and months on this new campaign, this new funnel, making it work, but then it wouldn't do well. And then it would lead me back to that dialogue, that inner child of, damn, it didn't go well again. See, this is happening. I wish it would go well for me like it does for other people that I see, comparing myself. And so the question for me is, how can I step back into my power? Who would I be if I stepped back into my power? If I were my higher self, how would I speak to myself? Well, then the dialogue changes to, hey, you're worrying about petty shit when God put you on this earth to achieve miraculous things. This is nothing. Figuring out ads is nothing. So for different people, there are different stimuli that have you step into your power, whether it be powerful music. Sometimes I listen to music to change my emotional state. Other times it's affirmations, things that you say to yourself, that I am a creation of God. I am a perfect idea in God's mind, in divine mind. Therefore, this is nothing. This will be figured out. In due time, this will be figured out. I just need to be patient. So then I speak to this inner child directly, like, Quazi, it's okay. I understand you're upset. Little Quazi, little child Quazi, I know you're upset. You really wanted to make this work. But trust me, there's a greater plan for you. God is never too late. So for you, when you're going through those moments in your life when nothing is working out and you just don't understand why, just remember this, God is never too late. It will happen when the time is right. You just need to be patient. The child just needs to be patient. Any sign of impatience, of feeling rushed, is that inner child just being frustrated that it's not getting its way. That's when you need to invoke this higher self and speak to yourself in that dialogue of, hey, It's okay. It's going to happen when the time is right. And I can promise you, if you stay in that persistence, if you stay embodied in that higher self, the things that do happen in your life are going to be beyond your wildest dreams. And that's exactly what happened with me when I was in that 9 to 5 that I hated, and I wanted to start my own business, and I was frustrated every single day that I'm not making any money. I'm not making the kind of money that I want. It's not working. Would people even pay for life coaching? That's when I had to invoke this higher self, my 2.0 self, saying, hey, Quazi, this is what you have conceived of right now. Just go all in on it. Don't look back. And in due time, either this will work or something else, something that's better, will show itself. Learning how to balance the different personas within me has been one of the most profound shifts that I've noticed happen in my life. But one thing that allowed for that to happen is understanding my own shadow and doing shadow work. So I've made a video that's now done over 1 million views on YouTube on shadow work, and there's a 30-day protocol in there. So all you need to do to access that, it's completely free to access, is just click right here and it will take you to the YouTube video where I talk about shadow work and how to properly do it.